What happens when a regional bloc, built on the ideals of unity and cooperation, fails to hold its own against the shifting tides of political power? This is the question reverberating across West Africa, as ECOWAS finds itself pleading for the return of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso after their military leaders, led by figures like Ibrahim Traoré, decided to break away. In a moment that echoes the struggles of Pan-African solidarity, ECOWAS, once a symbol of regional collaboration, now faces the bitter reality of its failure to prevent a rupture that many argue was inevitable. Was ECOWAS too slow to adapt to the changing political landscape, or does this departure signify the end of an era for the regional bloc? Live dive right into the situation at hand. The military-led West African nations of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso have officially withdrawn from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, signaling a dramatic shift in the political landscape of the region. The decision, which had been in the works for over a year, became effective on Wednesday, according to an official statement released by the ECOWAS Secretariat. This move marks the culmination of a year-long process that was initiated after the military-led governments in these three countries took power, overthrowing civilian administrations and further straining relations with the regional bloc. ECOWAS had worked tirelessly to prevent the withdrawal, attempting diplomatic measures in an effort to resolve the situation without triggering the unprecedented disintegration of the Union. However, despite these efforts, the bloc was ultimately unable to prevent the split, which now reflects the growing tensions between the military leaders and the regional body. In the statement, ECOWAS acknowledged the formal exit of the three nations from the organization and expressed regret over the outcome, which it described as unfortunate for the region. Nevertheless, the organization emphasized its commitment to maintaining ties with the countries, stating that it would keep ECOWAS doors open to future cooperation. The bloc called on its remaining members to continue offering the trio the privileges of ECOWAS membership, including the ability to travel freely within the region and access to the ECOWAS passport. These privileges, the statement said, are a symbol of regional unity and should not be taken away despite the formal withdrawal. Despite the political divide, ECOWAS President Omar Aliou Touré expressed optimism about the possibility of future collaboration between the bloc and the trio of countries. Speaking to reporters in the Nigerian capital, Abuja, Touré emphasized that, while the withdrawal marks a significant separation, the challenges facing West Africa, particularly the escalating violence from extremist groups, require a united front. The ECOWAS leader stressed that the bloc would continue to engage with the nations on issues of regional security, especially as terrorist activities and instability continue to affect the Sahel region. The ongoing threat of extremist groups, including those affiliated with Al-Qaeda and AES, has led to widespread insecurity, particularly in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. These three countries have become epicenters for violent insurgencies that have displaced millions and caused immense humanitarian suffering. As such, while the political landscape is shifting, the need for cooperation in addressing these urgent challenges remains paramount. Despite the withdrawal, the relationship between ECOWAS and the military-led governments is expected to remain complex. While there is room for potential dialogue on security matters, the political rift is likely to persist, especially as the military governments of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso continue to distance themselves from ECOWAS' core values of democratic governance. The bloc has consistently called for a return to civilian rule in the wake of military coups, but these governments have shown little willingness to comply with the regional body's demands. The future of ECOWAS remains uncertain in light of this historic withdrawal. The bloc, which has long been a pillar of political and economic stability in West Africa, may now find its influence weakened, as the departure of three member states raises questions about the organization's capacity to maintain unity and enforce its policies across the region. As the situation continues to unfold, all eyes will be on how ECOWAS navigates this new reality and whether it can maintain its relevance in addressing the growing security and political crises in West Africa. The coming months will likely be crucial in determining whether the bloc can rebuild its cohesion or whether the split will mark the beginning of a wider fracture within the region. The decision by the military leaders of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso to break from ECOWAS represents more than just a political rift. It marks a seismic shift in the region's geopolitical dynamics, one that sees these Sahelian nations not only severing ties with a regional organization, but also decisively turning their backs on France and its Western allies. In a sweeping move that challenges decades of colonial influence, these leaders have sent a clear message. The days of foreign interference in the region's affairs are over. The Sahel has long been a region where France, the former colonial power, has maintained a heavy military and economic presence under the guise of counter-terrorism efforts and regional stability. France's Operation Barkhane, which saw thousands of French troops stationed across Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, was primarily focused on combating extremist groups in the Sahel, which have been wreaking havoc across the region. However, this presence, despite being marketed as a protective force, was often seen by many in the region as serving French interests more than the people of the Sahel. Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Let's proceed. Over the years, resentment towards France's role has been simmering, fueled by accusations that its military interventions in the region were more about maintaining control over the region's resources and geopolitical positioning than actually addressing the root causes of insecurity. The military coups in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, which ousted long-standing civilian governments, have only amplified these sentiments. What began as a rejection of ECOWAS' perceived failure to safeguard West African sovereignty has now expanded into a wider challenge against the historical dominance of France in the region. As these three nations declare their independence from ECOWAS, their leaders have also expelled French and US troops stationed under bilateral agreements, tasked with upholding Western interests. Mali, in particular, made headlines in 2022 when it announced the expulsion of French troops and the end of Operation Barkhane. This was followed by the withdrawal of US forces, who had been involved in counterterrorism operations under the banner of the US-led Trans-Saharan Counterterrorism Partnership, TSCTP. Niger and Burkina Faso have taken similar steps, following suit in rejecting foreign military presence in their territories. For the military governments, this move is framed as a reclaiming of sovereignty, a rejection of the colonial-era legacy that continues to influence the region's political and economic affairs. Leaders like Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso and Assimi Goïta of Mali have repeatedly criticized the continued presence of foreign forces, pointing to the failure of these interventions to deliver lasting peace or development to the Sahel. Instead, they argue that the Western-backed military presence has only exacerbated insecurity, fueled local resentment, and allowed foreign powers to exert undue control over their country's resources. The withdrawal of foreign troops has been widely celebrated by some segments of the population who see it as a moment of liberation, an assertion of national sovereignty, and a rejection of Western neo-imperialism. In many ways, this break from ECOWAS and the expulsion of foreign military forces are seen as part of a larger Pan-African push to define the future of the Sahel on its own terms, without external interference. This is a region that has long been exploited for its natural resources, from uranium in Niger to gold in Burkina Faso. Yet the benefits of these resources have seldom trickled down to the local populations. With the departure of French and US forces, these countries are signaling a desire to chart a new path, one rooted in self-determination, free from the influence of former colonial powers and Western military presences. However, this dramatic shift is not without risks. While the Sahelian leaders seek greater autonomy, they are now faced with the complex task of managing their security without the support of the very powers they've rejected. The threat from extremist groups, including Al-Qaeda and ISIS affiliates, remains ever present, and while the military leaders have promised to bolster their own forces, there are concerns about whether they will be able to adequately address the growing violence in the region. Moreover, the departure from both ECOWAS and Western military alliances has left these countries isolated on the international stage. Their relationship with other African states could be strained, as ECOWAS continues to be a significant player in regional security and economic cooperation. Additionally, their rejection of foreign military aid may lead to a realignment of global alliances, as these countries seek new partnerships with other powers, such as Russia and China, both of which have expressed growing interest in expanding their influence in Africa. In the face of these challenges, the Sahelian countries' break from ECOWAS and the expulsion of foreign troops reflects a bold new vision for the region. It is a statement of intent, a call for a future free from the shadows of colonialism and foreign dominance. Whether this vision will succeed in bringing lasting peace and stability to the Sahel, however, remains to be seen. The leaders of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are now at a crossroads, with their people watching closely to see whether they can forge a path to security and prosperity without relying on the foreign powers that have long shaped their fate. In their bold rejection of ECOWAS and Western military presence, the leaders of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have sought to reorient their foreign policy towards countries that are more willing to support their vision of sovereignty and independence: Russia, China, and even North Korea. This shift is not merely a matter of political rhetoric. It is a tangible realignment that has seen these Sahelian nations strengthen military and economic ties with these powers, which have long been critical of Western influence in Africa. Ibrahim Traoré, the young and charismatic leader of Burkina Faso, has been at the forefront of this transformation. Since taking power in a military coup in 2022, Traoré has aggressively pursued foreign partnerships that reject the Western-centric model that has dominated the region for decades. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso has deepened its ties with Russia, which has become a significant player in the Sahel in recent years. The Russian government, eager to expand its influence in Africa and challenge the hegemony of former colonial powers, has provided Burkina Faso with military support, including weapons and expertise, as the country grapples with insurgencies from extremist groups. Ibrahim Traoré's outreach to Russia has also included a formal invitation to the notorious Wagner Group, a Russian paramilitary organization with close ties to the Kremlin. Wagner mercenaries have been deployed in Burkina Faso, providing military training and direct support to Burkinabe forces battling Islamist militants. These mercenaries, known for their shadowy operations and brutal tactics in places like Syria and Ukraine, have now found a foothold in the heart of West Africa, where they are helping bolster the country's military capabilities as it fights against the growing insurgency. This partnership is seen as a direct challenge to France's former military dominance in the region and a clear signal that Traoré is committed to breaking the mold of traditional African dependence on Western powers. Mali, under its military leader Assimi Goïta, has similarly aligned itself with Russia, with the Kremlin stepping up to fill the vacuum left by France's withdrawal of troops. Mali has received Russian weapons, ammunition, and military training, all aimed at strengthening the country's ability to combat the extremist insurgents that have plagued the Sahel for nearly a decade. Mali has also allowed Wagner Group forces to operate within its borders, further deepening its ties to Russia's mercenary network. The Russian support has provided an alternative to the Western-backed counter-terrorism operations, which many in Mali viewed as ineffective and self-serving. Niger, under its new military leadership, has also begun to tilt toward Russia and China. In 2023, Niger saw an increasing flow of Russian diplomats and military advisors into the country, as the military under its leader joined the growing chorus of African leaders calling for a shift away from Western influence. Ibrahim Traoré, in particular, has championed this change, advocating for a greater alignment with countries that respect the sovereignty of African nations and provide alternative paths for military and economic development. China has become a key player in this new strategic alliance, providing Niger with investments and infrastructure projects, including roads and energy projects, in exchange for access to the country's vast mineral resources. The relationship with China has proved especially beneficial for these nations. China has been a significant source of investment, particularly in mining and energy sectors, which are vital to the economies of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, has extended its reach into the Sahel, with the construction of vital infrastructure projects that offer much-needed economic development and connectivity in exchange for increased political influence. Ibrahim Traoré, ever the pragmatist, has seen the value in these partnerships, recognizing that China's growing presence in Africa offers Burkina Faso a way to secure its economic future while distancing itself from the West. But perhaps the most striking aspect of Ibrahim Traoré's foreign policy has been his purchase of military drones from Turkey. These unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, represent a significant leap forward for Burkina Faso's military capabilities. By acquiring drones from Turkey, Traoré has demonstrated his intent to modernize Burkina Faso's armed forces and improve their ability to monitor and combat insurgent activity across the vast and porous borders of the country. These drones, which have become a critical component of modern warfare, will allow Burkina Faso to strike targets with greater precision and conduct surveillance operations over difficult terrain. In addition to drones, Traoré has pursued a variety of other weapon systems from China. These include small arms, artillery, and armored vehicles, all of which are critical for maintaining the military's strength in the face of growing extremist threats. This move away from Western suppliers, particularly France, has signaled a deepening fracture in the historical security arrangements that have long governed the Sahel. Ibrahim Traoré's strategic relationships with these non-Western powers represent a stark shift in the region's political and military landscape. While the Sahel has long been a battleground for influence between Western powers like France and the United States and their adversaries, including Russia and China, the leaders of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are rewriting the rules of engagement. For Ibrahim Traoré, this is a calculated gamble, one that seeks to free his country from the dominance of former colonial powers, and at the same time, ensure that the security and sovereignty of Burkina Faso remain intact. The impact of these moves is already being felt across the Sahel, with the increased presence of Russian mercenaries, Chinese investments, and Turkish military equipment marking the beginning of a new era in the region. While the future remains uncertain, it is clear that Ibrahim Traoré and his counterparts in Mali and Niger are determined to pursue a path that reflects a more independent and self-reliant vision for the Sahel, one that is no longer tethered to the whims of foreign powers, particularly those from the West. Whether this bold shift will lead to lasting peace and stability in the region, or whether it will provoke further conflict, remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: Ibrahim Traoré is determined to chart a new course for Burkina Faso and the Sahel, and he is willing to embrace new alliances to make that vision a reality. As Ibrahim Traoré continues to assert his authority over Burkina Faso, he is not only reshaping his country's foreign relations, but also taking bold steps to secure its economic independence. One of his most significant moves has been his decision to pay off the country's mounting debts, a symbolic gesture of financial sovereignty that underscores his commitment to breaking free from the stranglehold of Western financial institutions. In a move that has captured international attention, Traoré has decided to reject any further aid or loans from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, an institution long criticized for its stringent conditions that often leave African nations in a cycle of debt dependency. This decision comes after Traoré took control of Burkina Faso's vast natural resources, which have long been exploited by Western corporations with little benefit to the local population. The country is rich in gold, uranium, and other minerals, resources that have been historically extracted by foreign companies with limited reinvestment in the local economy. Under Traoré's leadership, Burkina Faso is seeking to reclaim these resources and ensure that the profits are reinvested into the country, providing the capital needed to pay down the national debt and fund critical infrastructure projects. Traoré's rejection of IMF aid is seen as a direct challenge to the Western economic system that has shaped Africa's economic landscape for decades. By rejecting these loans, which often come with austerity measures and economic restructuring that exacerbate inequality, Traoré is signaling a rejection of the model that has kept African nations financially dependent on foreign powers. Instead, he is charting a new path for Burkina Faso, one where the country's wealth is used to build a more self-sufficient and resilient economy, free from the conditions imposed by international financial institutions. The control over natural resources has allowed Burkina Faso to begin generating its own wealth, bypassing the need for foreign loans and the economic manipulation that often accompanies them. This move is not just about financial independence, but also about reclaiming the nation's dignity and sovereignty. By rejecting the IMF's aid, Ibrahim Traoré is asserting that Burkina Faso will no longer be a pawn in the global economic game, but rather a player in its own right, using its resources to secure a better future for its people. Ibrahim Traoré has faced numerous coup attempts, not because of failure, but due to his remarkable achievements in strengthening Burkina Faso's sovereignty and security. His leadership, alongside that of Mali's Assimi Goïta and Niger's Abdourahmane Tiani, has marked a significant shift in West Africa's geopolitical landscape. By leaving ECOWAS and aligning with non-Western nations, these countries are asserting their independence from Western influence and seeking partnerships that better serve their interests. While this bold move presents economic and diplomatic challenges, it also signals a new era of regional cooperation driven by self-determination and a rejection of neocolonial pressures. The path ahead remains uncertain, but one thing is clear: Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are reshaping West Africa's future on their own terms. Do you think leaving ECOWAS was the best option for the Sahel leaders? What do you think will become of ECOWAS? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed, you're becoming part of a movement dedicated to reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change. Thanks for watching.